Here's a question for you. How can we protect our information in the era of AI?
I'm Alyssa Blackburn.
I'm Mike Loader. TechEdge starts now. Hello everyone and welcome back to TechEdge, presented by the team at AvePoint, where each episode we delve into the latest industry trends for business, IT, and of course their significance in today's ever-changing landscape. Now, with breaches on the rise, information protection is more important than ever before. And I am joined by Alyssa, who is here to talk to me a little bit about what's going on out there when it comes to this AI-generated issue we're seeing.
Absolutely, and we talked to one of our previous guests who gave us a great example and a great analogy of treating information like it's uranium rather than it's gold.
Brilliant.
And I really, really liked that, and I think that flows really beautifully onto the conversation that we're about to have now, which is for years and years and years now, we have hoarded and treated our information like it's gold and like we're suddenly going to run dry of it kind of things. We have to hold on to it for as much as we can. But what we're making for ourselves is a really significant burden in actually managing this vast quantity of information, where what we should be doing is really only looking at keeping the stuff that we need and then putting really good protections around that. And of course, the AI era has thrown a massive rock in that pond, and now we're dealing with not only the ripples, but the waves of what that's going to look like. So our guest today really has a lot of experience in this area, and I think is going to really give us some good stuff to have a think about.
Wonderful. Well, let's not muck about. Let's bring in John Hodges, Senior VP of Product Strategy at AvePoint. Wonderful to have you with us. Can you describe a scenario where privacy concerns clashed with AI innovation?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, and it's a tall order to come up with an analogy that's more relatable than uranium and gold.
Yeah.
I actually have it.
Okay.
Have you ever had someone else clean your house? So could be anyone, could be a parent or a spouse, someone just looking in after you've gone through an illness, or a professional cleaner. Have you ever had someone else come into your mess, into your world?
Yeah.
And
Have you been talking to my mother?
Do continue.
Yeah.
So if you're anything like me, there's an instinctive reaction that you have to clean the house before the cleaners get there. You have to hide the shame before the cleaners arrive. So think of it this way. You mentioned data hoarding. I've been at my position for almost 20 years.
Wow.
You can think of the number of vendor security assessments I've done, product specs I've done, press releases for products that have never made it to market. You can think about the legal contracts that I've been part of. And all of that is stored in my corporate OneDrive. So if I were to now bring in AI, generative AI, that's helping to learn and reason over all my contents, just like having a cleaner come into my house exactly the way it is right now, there's an instinctive reaction that says, I need to be hiding things. And I think that is a healthy fear, and that is something that we really want to help customers and every enterprise that could be looking at generative AI really embrace.
Absolutely, and I think that was a really good analogy as well. I'm realizing I stole your question off the top there.
Oh, no, that's all right. I was more thinking about how I once greeted a friend who was coming to visit me from the UK with a massive glitter sign that said, "We've been panic cleaning all morning." And so...
Some businesses should implement that.
That's exactly right. So I felt John's analogy on a very deep personal level, definitely.
And one that we'll take with us into the days ahead. But how would you handle data anonymization? There's a word for me, and de-identification when it comes to AI projects. I think that's an interesting one as well when it comes to sort of, not hiding, but changing it up.
Yeah, and it's a great question, because if my data is out there and we have this fear that it's going to get reasoned over before we bring in these outside generative AIs, clearly we've got to be asking the right questions. And if I have consumer data, it would be excellent if I could tell the sentiment of my customers based on their support cases they created, or if I could have some sort of history of, what conversations are most popular in my sales and support calls. If I never gathered consent from those customers or those users, that could be in violation of GDPR, that could be in violation of all sorts of regulations around the world, because that definitely is an extension beyond what I contractually agreed with, beyond what we said when we signed up together to work together. And so there's that fear. If I just take all the information that generative AI is finding around the house for me, this corporate house, and bringing it to me, there's a good chance that I'm essentially crossing boundaries I shouldn't be. That's where anonymization really comes into play. How do we clean and scrub that data before generative AI ever gets its hands on it?
Really good point there. And John, you mentioned as well about user consent, and you said, it would be great to understand, support sentiment, or, some of the key, get a summary of some of the key issues that we're seeing or things like that. But how do we ensure that any data or information that we're collecting is done so with user consent?
Yeah, so it gets back to this fundamental problem of data hoarding. Having the data is not necessarily a bad thing. Having it isolated and purposefully used is a really good thing. And generally what I'm going to need is some sort of outside-in help to be there. So panic cleaning in your friend's case is a great example, because in a lot of cases, before you're deploying something like generative AI, it's a chance to now come through and do some cleansing of that data. So it's a little bit like having doors in your office building that automatically close. You're not waiting for the fire to find out whether your doors actually do close. This is something that we have automatically closing for us. Users have to acknowledge and push open the exit doors before leaving. So that kind of engagement with data and making sure that we're intentionally sharing it, and we are intentionally opening it up to other users and intentionally using that consent is one of the first fundamental steps that we need to take before deploying that AI. It's how we keep everyone's data safe and stay in contract with our customers.
No, really, really interesting points there, definitely. And I think also, even just from a consumer or an individual perspective, what we also need to think about is what we're signing up for when we are consenting to things like this. And also, how much do we have to read and understand, or how many
terms and conditions.
Exactly. How many legal degrees do we need before we can actually understand that? So I think that there's both responsibility on the service provider's side, be that, through, say, something like social media, or through corporate applications or things like that. There's responsibility there to ensure that the user does have a very clear understanding of what they are agreeing to and signing up for. But also from the consumer or individual's perspective, there is responsibility to have that same level of understanding, and to, first of all, it should be provided to you in a way that is easy for you to consume. But you should have responsibility into that, because it is your information, it is your data that we're talking about.
But I'm excited to get into these AI applications and throw all of my data into it and get going.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Absolutely.
And then boom, it's too late.
Yeah.
So that's an excellent point. And here's the thing, as a service provider myself, I want you to trust AI, and I want you to trust what I'm doing with this data so that we can do cooler things together. So as an example, if you work in IT, you probably want to compare the controls and safeguards you have against your peers. Most regulations require you to do the industry standard, but how do I measure that? Unless I'm a very social person, it's difficult to do that with a human intervention. But if I have AI that can help you make suggestions and compare you to your peers and look for opportunities for you to grow and be safer overall, I actually want you to engage with AI, and I want more data provided. So, you mentioned something interesting about how we have to build trust now as service providers back to users, and communicating how that data is being secured and what barriers and fire doors we're putting in place between your data and other customers, or between identifying you and just simply knowing about your sentiment. Those are all really important safeguards. That's our job to educate back to our customers and back to the end users themselves.
So John, what is the most important thing when we're thinking about sensitive information, when we're thinking about AI, when we're thinking about the role of service that that we play in here, and again bringing the consumer and the service provider together? And I think some really valuable points there, definitely. What's the one most important thing that business leaders need to think about?
You cannot say no to this. And I think it's an important step. It's just like your friends could not uninvite you once you're on the plane and on your way. You cannot say no to generative AI. The reality is, anyone you're hiring in from the workforce is going to already be exposed to Gemini or ChatGPT or something in their private life And they will continue to use it even if your terms and conditions say, hey, we'll use this within our corporate security boundary. You have to acknowledge that it's coming. So if that's the case, if you cannot say no, what can you do? And that really comes down to cleaning your own house and making sure you have those safeguards in place. That does require an investment beyond simply saying, oh, this is how much a Gemini or a Copilot license might cost me. It requires also budgeting for those security safeguards, those doors, those things that can wall off all of your most sensitive data for when you bring AI into your environment. It's not an if, you will bring it in at some point. It's a question of how prepared you'll be when it comes.
I think you're absolutely right. I think organisations who are saying, oh no, nobody in our organisation is using it, are living in a state of delusion, definitely. It's too late. That ship has sailed. That AI era is here. It is now. My 11-year-old daughter has an app on her phone that has an AI keyboard. She doesn't anymore after I discovered that that's what it did. But, so it's everywhere. It's prolific. And you're absolutely right. You cannot say no. We've already crossed that boundary. We've already gone too far. And now it's about, okay, it's here, it's happening, there's nothing we can do about it. What supporting things do we need to put in place around that to make it effective, to make it ethical, to make it efficient, to make it usable, to get the business outcomes that we need, most definitely. I think John made a really, really valuable point about, sure, you can budget for the actual AI tools, but you also have to budget for all of the other bits and pieces that go around that to ensure that we are working towards information protection and making sure that we are actually getting to the business outcomes that we need. I think a lot of organisations forget about that part of it. It's just, oh great, I'll buy this license and now I'm all sorted. As opposed to, no, actually you need all of these other things to make it really valuable.
John, I want to thank you for joining us on the program, highlighting a little bit more about what's going on. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you for having me.
And of course, Alyssa, thank you for your time and bringing such great topics, great guests here to
We have learnt so much in this series. I think it's been absolutely fantastic, and I've personally taken some stuff away that I will be sprouting off all over the place.
Awesome. Me too. Hey, thank you all for joining us here on the program. It's all the time we've got for you for now. Hopefully you've learned something from our discussion. A lot going on when it comes to AI. Keep tabs on it because it is going to keep changing, but we'll be covering it right here on the Tech Edge. Be well.
You're watching Ticker. We'll have more in just a few minutes.